welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Brent Aiken, David Pruitt, and Russell Martin. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's your host for this week, Brent Aiken. Hey, and welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time listening to us, we want to welcome you and invite you over to our website, studentministryconversations.org, where you can find all of our previous episodes, show notes, blog articles, and basically our goal with this podcast is that you are inspired, encouraged, and the things that you hear on this podcast can equip you to be a better student pastor for the church that you're serving in. And so today we are sitting down with maybe someone you know, maybe someone you should go check out, but his name is Shama Mrema. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's it.
Did I say that right?
It.
Or did I?
Yep.
Perfect, man. So with that, like, Shama has been in kind of a social media icon in Christian circles for probably since the 2017, 2018-ish realm.
Icon/villain. Can you add that so people know that my content's got a little bit of a bite?
Yeah, whatever. So icon/villain since 2017, 2018. You've probably seen some of his church skit humor comedy on Instagram and TikTok and all the other things. But man, Shama, tell us about you. Tell us where you're from, how you got into this, anything and everything you want to share about you.
Okay, I'm going to try to make it brief because I feel like I've talked about this. People will know most of this. I was born in Tanzania, East Africa, moved to the States when I was young with my family, moved back. While we were in the States, we were very Pentecostal, and we joined a Pentecostal denomination to become missionaries. We moved back to Africa to plant a church, So I was a pastor's kid, bishop's kid, missionary kid for years. And then my family, I graduated. I was homeschooled while I was there, moved back to the States for college. While I was in college, volunteered at a church, became a student pastor after I graduated Bible college, as one does. And I quickly realized within months that student pastoring was not for me, and so did the senior pastor. And so I was voluntarily booted. I was given the left boot of non-fellowship out of there. But that also the getting demoted from a local church, being fired from being a student pastor, kind of I got to land in comedy, and so that was a huge blessing in disguise. And so that's kind of my upbringing. I'm married now. I have 3 kids. I've been married going on 6 years in like a couple of weeks, and my wife and I have 3 kids. Don't do the math too much on that. But love my family, love my kids. I love jokes, and I get to travel around telling jokes at camps, conferences, events, volunteer staff parties, every gig that John Christ turns down or is too expensive to be at. Those are the ones that I'm at currently. And we actually met at one of those events, Youth Pastor Summit, and that was really, really fun out in I think Dallas, right?
Yeah. So like he just said, we officially met face to face. I've been watching Shama since he really kind of got on Instagram and just different social media channels, going back to the things pastors say and all kinds of different videos. Man, that one always made me laugh because like you literally took 4 or 5 statements out of my pastor's mouth. Especially the therefore you go back and look what it's there for. I mean, man. gold stuff. But with that, like, we met at YPS, and it was just like, man, Shama was the MC for the event, and I caught him out in the hallway. I was like, dude, I got to shoot my shot. I was like, I got like youth pastor, do a podcast. And he was like, bro, I was a youth pastor. I was like, okay. He was like, but I wasn't long. He was like, I don't know if I'm qualified for your podcast. But so with that being said, though, how was comedy something, before we kind of get into the meat of the conversation, was comedy something you've always kind of leaned to, or was that kind of like a, I guess more of a hidden asset, so to speak, of like where you kind of uncovered it one day and you were like, whoa, oh wow, this is kind of cool. I could use this.
I was one of 3 kids, and my older brother and younger sisters, I was a middle child. They got along really well, and so I was the solo middle child syndrome. All of that is me. playing with Legos by myself for way too long, creating these scenes and stories with these characters. And my mom used to say, like, you would just entertain yourself for hours. And then I remember watching TV when I was a kid, and I don't know why I just had the thought, like I remember I was watching Barney or something, and I saw kids like me on TV, and I thought, oh, I want to be in that show. And so I got a knife, and I was like 4 or 5. I started cutting the edges of the TV because I thought there were little people in there. And I thought, I'm going to join them so I can be in that show. Like, I feel like I can be in that. And my mom loves telling that story because now she's like, now you actually are on people's TVs. And so, yeah, there was always just like an aspect of seeing any type of entertainment, somebody singing a song, or like especially comedy. I remember I saw Jesse Duplantis live, and my dad had a Jesse Duplantis VHS called A Merry Heart Doeth Good Like a Medicine, Volume 8. I'll never forget it. You can Google it to see the cover. And it was just like Jesse Duplantis I know he's a very wild, insanely rich megachurch pastor right now. But he used to tell these sermons with like a really funny story in them. And this VHS series would just clip out. It was essentially just a compilation of those funny stories, for like an hour. And I remember watching them with my dad when I was younger, and my dad would just laugh and laugh and laugh till he cried. And I just thought, wow, this guy's doing that with his words and his stories. And I'm also seeing my dad like really, really enjoy that. And I thought, I think I want to do that. So I just started off, I'd make little characters and put on a show for my brother and sister, hide and come out with a costume or something. And so that was like the genesis of it, of just having a lot of free time, being homeschooled, and just going like, hey, I want to entertain myself and I want to entertain my siblings. They don't know what real entertainment is, so I can be bad for 10 minutes at a time, and they just have to watch.
That's fair. Homeschooling for you right there. Now, with that being said, though, that's awesome because like it's kind of something that seems like you've built on over the course of your life. What was that kind of, I guess, if you had one, that kind of shining career moment where you were like, man, I think I could actually do this for a living? Wow. Was it post youth ministry? Was it before youth ministry? I mean, had you started to kind of do it during your college years? I mean,
yeah, in college I had started like I had a YouTube channel, and I would make things and I'd show people at my college and they would share them. So it had all of the makings of like, make a little thing. Of course it's not good. I don't understand writing. I don't understand production. I don't understand video. I would just put it up on YouTube. I'd film it. I remember I filmed one video with like a webcam on my computer. I just propped my webcam up. But I had enough feedback from friends and family to go like, oh, I really liked that video. And there was a friend of mine who she became a missionary in Sudan, and I remember her telling me, she was like, we downloaded one of your videos, her and another lady. She was like, we just watched them and laughed over and over. And so I had enough affirmation and encouragement from friends to kind of go, hey, I think I'm okay at this. I know I'm bad at it, but people like what I'm doing, so I'm heading in the right direction. And, I inserted comedy into my sermons when I was a student pastor. And so even the students would be like, I really enjoy like the first, 10 minutes of your sermon because I know it's going to be something really funny. And then I'm like, well, what about like the other 45 minutes when I'm talking about the Bible? Like, can you stick around for that? I was a long-winded student pastor. But I just thought, I was like, okay, there is something here. And so that was really encouraging, like getting starting off and then getting like that type of affirmation and assurance from friends, family, and the occasional stranger or a mutual friend or something. That was good, and that was like the fuel that pushed me in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And so, I mean, now, like you said, you're kind of doing this pretty much professionally. I mean, where this is your kind of career, and
yeah.
It's going very, very well for you. Your name, you mentioned you take all the things that John Chris doesn't take, but at the same time though, dude, like, I mean, when it comes to household names in Christian comedy,
yeah,
I mean, you're getting up there on the list, which is a pretty awesome feat to have. but then also there's a lot of, I guess, a lot of experience and a lot of expertise that comes with that as well. And so, obviously, you've been doing this for a while. You've done it, like you said, in conferences. You've done it for volunteer trainings. You've done it for youth pastors. You've done it, I mean, all across the board. Where does the parallel of like laughter and like finding that sense of camaraderie through laughter and joy fit into what you do, and why is that such an impactful part of you, like just your ministry as a whole?
Yeah. So that is like the really craziest part, I believe, to my story was I got fired from a church, and my friends said, my friends and family were like, hey, you should just apply at another church. And I said, no, I don't think I want to work I don't think I want to be another church employee. I think the church is one of a necessary, incredible institution that's been around for forever. I talked to all my creative friends. We all started off in a church, so I'm not one of those guys who's like, no, not for. It just wasn't for me. I just wasn't built for that. So getting, being kicked, kicked out of it, to put it kindly. There was this thought of like, I didn't have another plan. Like I was working at a church and I delivered pizza like part-time, and then I just went to delivering pizza full-time. That was it. And so people would ask me like, man, what are you doing? I know you just graduated from Bible college. Like, what are you up to? And I remember just telling them like, hey, I deliver pizza right now. Like that's the big plan of God for my life. That's the going to Bible college. You have all these people who are like, oh, God's got a great calling on your life. And there was a season there where my calling was just to deliver pizza to people's houses for money. And so getting into creating and then like writing, and then I knew to write what I know. And I'm like, what do I know? And I'm like, Christian culture. Like I grew up in it. I've been to hundreds of churches in the Bible Belt, churches in Africa, all of that. I'm like, okay, let me just write what I know. And so that started landing with people, and people were relating. And somewhere in the middle, I got invited to visit one of these churches. Like a youth pastor hit me up and was like, hey, can you come like tell jokes at like a student event that I'm doing? And I thought, I mean, sure, me? Okay, cool. And then it happened again. And then it happened again. And then I get there, and there was this like, oh, we love what you're doing, and we love this, and we love that. And also, just this, there was a time where, especially even being at YPS, like Youth Pastor Summit, and shout out to that whole Student Leadership University team, Jeff and Brent and all the rest of the ladies and guys who work over there. Being invited to that event was like, hey, I thought I was out of this world, but because comedy is just one of those things that, just draws people together. It's one of those things it's shareable. Like you could read a Bible verse and talk about the impact of it on Instagram right now. And I could upload a video making fun of your pastor, and my video will probably do better than your Bible verse, just because people are like, people think it's funny in that way. And like it has its shareability. The shareability of it is really, really, really unique. And so that, kind of in a roundabout way, I got off on this like a non-existent exit of ministry and went through this almost reminds me of the Cars movie, where he like goes on this accident, he ends up in Radiator Springs.
Yeah.
Now I'm talking about cars,
And I was gonna say, tell me you have young kids without telling me you have young kids,
buddy. I've seen the movie Cars. That's more times than I have any other movie in the past 5 years.
Yep.
And then kind of getting back into what I initially left has been an incredible blessing. And so comedy is just one of those things, man, that just the appeal of it. It's like dessert, man. Who doesn't want dessert?
Yeah. No, and a lot of times in conference culture and stuff like that, they often throw out dessert first.
Yeah.
you're first in line. And so, but
man.
I think that there's, like you said, there's something incredibly drawing about, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a comedy. I mean, because going through the conference circles as well, like I've seen illusionists, I've seen all kinds of stuff, and anything that allows that the formality to go away
Yeah.
for just a brief moment, to kind of just enjoy being goofy and fun and everything like that. I think there's some tremendous impact to it. And I think that's one of the things that, like, especially in churches, we kind of almost like caution tape for a little bit, and we're like, hey, like, this isn't a laughing scenario. It's like,
Yeah.
why can't it be? So kind of transitioning into that, like, where have you seen those, I guess, those unexpected moments? Like, do you have a personal, like, reflection of, like, a one time where you were somewhere and, like, something like God happened crazy that you were involved in, and you were like, dude, I don't even know. I was in the room. I was at the backwater cooler, like, getting a drink. I don't, like,
Yeah.
kind of thing like that. Like,
So one really cool thing is that I started at the church. I was at a church where the pastor was a very loose cannon. He would just say stuff occasionally, and he was always talking so fast, like, just out of passion. And God bless passionate people. But occasionally he would say something so wild that, you'd have to talk to somebody later at lunch and just be like, do you remember when he said, how crazy was that? And then you have to leave it at that. Like, you can't.
yeah,
That's a very. I heard somebody say, like a back row thing. Like, only people on the back row enjoy a conversation like that. Gossip. I'll just cut to the chase. Front row people, they're not into that. That's not for them. Like, they're gonna be like, oh, you got a guy here, touch not the Lord's anointed. No, us back row people, we're talking about what you said. And so a friend and I just had this idea. My friend and frequent collaborator, co-writer, PD, Paul David, we started writing this character. We're like, hey, we should write a loose cannon guest speaker, just straight up copying our old pastor, because we went to the same church together. And we're like, let's just write down the craziest, like 20 of the craziest lines, like he said, or something he would say. And we wrote these out. And they're wild. So the character is loose cannon guest speaker. And I think the first one, we put it up in like 2020. And it just took off. We did a second one. And we did a third one. And we're like, hey, we're done. Each one of them, we're like, we can't write anything crazier. And in doing those, we were just kind of putting them out, being like, oh, pastors say the darnest things sometimes. But there were so many people in the comments. It turned into like this, like a forum of people going like, I'm glad I didn't go to a church where my student pastor says crazy things. Or I'm glad I'm not the only person who was deeply offended by what a pastor said about, about a freaking body weight, or or about like alcohol or suicide, or like their pastors just. People just were like, oh, I'm glad I'm not the only person who experienced something like this. And I thought, oh yeah, I guess it would be a different thing if it was like a what is the term, like a takedown of like things pastors shouldn't say. But it wasn't that. It was just sort of like, hey, here's a guy who's saying the craziest things, and people could all watch that and go like, oh, pastors aren't supposed to talk like that. And the pastor that the event that I was at, where I saw a guy talk like that, that was not right. And also, I'm not alone in witnessing that. And so that was really, really, really cool to me. And that's a thing that people talk to me about a lot. Like, I'll be at an event, and people will be like, oh, I got to tell you what my, what a children's church pastor once said when I was younger. And I'm like, and they'll tell me. And I'm like, that's crazy. And so just that in and of itself, has just been like, you're just reassured that you're not crazy. Because sitting under that pastor was like, this is crazy. But then telling other people, it's almost like just finally acknowledging the elephant in the room and putting a big spotlight on it. And people going like, oh, it's been there the whole time. And there shouldn't have been an elephant in this context.
Yeah. No, and I think though, at the same time, like you just said, it brings that element of community. Yeah. But then I'm sure that out of that community also came opportunities for healing.
Yeah.
Because it's like, hey, I'm not the only one that dealt with this. Like, this pastor said this 20 years ago. I still remember it. I'm still kind of messed up by it. Now, and like, so having that community and that kind of building on each other might have had some opportunities for further conversation and healing to happen too, which is great.
Now, I think that this conversation could go in a very serious tone. I'm going to leave that to professionals. But I will say, you know,
Sure.
the aspect of healing being brought about is not one I'm not gonna like sit here and go like my comedy is bringing healing.
Yeah, no.
But the aspect of it being healing, I remember somebody had commented, I'd said something so outrageous in one of those videos. The character did, not me. I would never say that. The character had said something so outrageous, and somebody commented, "Oh, my pastor said that last Sunday," and I remember I just responded back, "Leave that church." Like that's it. That
Man.
this is what I'm, you know. And I could there have been I you know, somebody else would probably say, you know, you as the person, as a Christian, a believer, you should have responded and messaged him and told him that yada yada yada. But it just was one of those things like, no, it should not be this way. This is an extreme version of a character. And so I think with truth like that, we wrote a song a couple years ago called the Worship Song, which is a parody of worship songs. And some people really, really loved it. And it just was one of those things like, hey, in that, when the song came out, it did really well. Released it in March of 2020, right before the world, you know, almost folded. So people were sitting at home watching it. And I remember somebody had told me, a friend or family member was like, hey, you should create a follow-up video of explaining what true worship is and what a worship song needs to be. And I just remember thinking, no, like I already explained what it shouldn't be. And that's it, man. As a comedian, I set that one sail and a sail, and I'm done. I'm back on the dock trying to cook up something else, you know,
Sure, yeah.
push out into the open waters of the internet. But I think that's the lane that I am in. And I think the aspect of people kind of going like, oh, that's weird, or starting the journey being of you know, we'll use the term healing. It is cool to play a part in that, or just to kind of go like, hey, that's calling out the absurdity of something, and then somebody going like, well, what do you think should happen in the local church or body of believers? And I'm like, hey, buddy, that's above my pay grade. But I believe you can find it. I believe that there are good people in your city, and God will direct you to find those. That's not a role that I'm
That's good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like even with you cracking jokes, like you're opening the door to those conversations happening, which is great. And if that's your calling, man, that's your calling, and that's an awesome thing. So
it's really
with
fun.
that though, that was kind of the transition that I was going to make to kind of the next, I guess, topic as far as like just the impact that comedy can have. Kind of gearing more towards a student ministry mindset. What are the effects of laughter in regards to like just meeting new people or breaking down those barriers, building relationships? And we kind of just hit on this one, but also understanding our shortcomings. I think that's the beauty of Christian comedy so much, is it's like, oh yeah, like we are terrible at this, like kind of thing. And so it's okay to laugh at ourselves. And when someone puts out a video that's kind of like making fun of something that happened, or making fun of like something that Christians do on a regular basis, it's like, oh, well, yeah, no, that is funny, because we're all terrible at that. So what is the effect of laughter in those regards of, like I said, breaking down barriers, or like meeting that person that you've never met before, or that might be shy, building relationships, and then also just like laughing at the shortcomings of what we do terrible at?
So you ask anybody like who is a group of people who takes themselves too seriously, and that would be, you know, that would be Christians. I'm Baptist, and we're kind of top of that list, man. I read I didn't read, I'm sorry, I listened. I don't read. I listen more than I read. I listened to a very great audiobook called the Serrated Edge, and it was a look at satire in the Bible. It's written by a guy named Douglas Wilson. It was like a 2.5 hour listen. I don't know how many pages that in. I only work in minutes when I'm listening, because I'm a listener, not a reader. But the book it just talks about the way the Bible, so many authors and people in the Bible used satire to convey messages. Jesus especially, like so many of the things that he said, the way he talked to people, you know, calling calling a group of people like a brood of vipers, you know, sons of snakes. In another part, Jesus telling a lady, hey, it's not fair. It's not nice to give food to dogs, like scraps to, or to throw out good food to what, like verses like that, where the context is lost on us because it's English, but then also we also think about it like, but Jesus, when Jesus said it, he was holy and he was speaking the truth in love and all that. Like, no, but in that context, that was a rude thing to say. Like, if a pastor called a politician a son of a snake, that would be like, whoa, you can't talk like that. But Jesus did use those elements and all of the different facets of satire and the language of almost like jokes in a way to kind of guide people's hearts to truth. So I think that's the one aspect that when people hear like comedy or laughing, it is almost people are like, oh, that's irreverent. Like, we shouldn't be a pastor talking about I mean, the only thing I think of right now is like, I don't know, stomach troubles or something. That's considered like bathroom humor or but you think about it, you're like, well, that is something that most people face if you're traveling or whatever. If you go on a mission trip somewhere out of the third world country, like, hey man, you might catch 48 hours of absolute heck in a bathroom, but you know, it's one of those things like, well, you know, we don't talk like that in the pulpit or whatever. So I think there is an aspect of, well, we got to like put on reverence of this, you know, as we're talking about God's word, as we're talking about you know, who we are in Christ. And a conversation I had with a young person who asked a silly question. It's like, no, I gotta kind of clean it up and sound serious. But I think being you know, comedy and humor and stuff like that, like, that puts the guard down, man. It just lets people know, hey man, I'm real. You know, I'm real first, and I'm gonna say it how it is. So I've been in green rooms with people and I'm like, hey man, you're dressed ridiculous right now. This is a Christian conference and you're wearing $500 sneakers. I've been in green rooms with, you know, Christian artists, and I'm like, hey, everybody, I'm the only person with the cheapest luggage in here. All of y'all have Louis Vuitton luggage, you know, that thing. And people are like, no, it's funny. But then also people are like, it is one of those things. I'm like, no, what is going on here? What is going on here? I'm flipping on some of these lights because I think it's really, you know, like, I'm going to say something. And that's been like my part of like, hey, I'm going to try to speak truth in a context where everybody else would kind of ignore, you know, a scenario because it's, oh, but it's a, you know, whatever, you know, you would never say that. I'm like, no, I'm going to say it. I think somebody should say it.
But I think there's boldness in that too, with the mindset of like, you know, some of these things need to be said. Because like you said, they've kind of been swept under the rug, or they've kind of been overlooked for a long time. And we're not just getting into these conversations of like, look, this is not okay. And making a lighthearted joke at it is sometimes all you need to at least get the wheels turning and be like, oh, well, maybe, I don't necessarily know, like, that really isn't okay, kind of thing. I
mean, I also think about being a follower of Jesus is a God kind of sending us out, putting us in the places that we are. I would say for my story in particular, it is one of those things. I'm like, man, God is the funniest of us all. You know, there's a Jewish proverb that says, man plans, God laughs. And I'm like, oh yeah, because God's plans, just like the Bible says, like, his ways aren't our ways, and our thoughts are not his thoughts. And I think I was just listening to a Tim Keller sermon, and he mentions a C.S. Lewis quote where C.S. Lewis said that, you know, when we believe that God is building us, like, I'm going to butcher the quote because it's C.S. Lewis, but he says, when we believe that God is like rebuilding us, we believe that God is coming in and taking a shack, which is our lives, and, you know, he'll redo the floor and paint the inside and paint the outside and redo the shutters and all that. But God is actually trying to tear that shack down and build a palace. that's what he's building us into. And I thought that was such a beautiful analogy, because even as, as Christians or as ministry, you think, I was a student pastor. So, I thought, well, student pastors, notoriously, you think really highly of the ministry that you're doing, and that God, you can have a student ministry of 500 people and all these things. But there is an idea of like, what God wants to do with you and in your city, in your context, in your ministry, is probably not what you want to do. Like, God's building something completely different. But the fact that God is doing that, and also is letting us, air quote, build at the same time, and he uses that and him to lead us to him. I mean, what is that if not a beautiful misunderstanding and misdirection of every sitcom possible that ends on a high note?
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I mean, God, that's a really good quote. I might have to get you to send me that Tim Keller sermon.
Man. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so obviously, though, through this, most of us youth pastors listening to this and everything else, most of us try to include some sense of humor. But a lot of times I think it's really tongue in cheek. And I don't think we go through the understanding of what it can actually do, and how things can actually happen. And like, I tell people all the time when I'm talking to youth pastors, I was like, you need something that can just absolutely take a kid that doesn't want to say a word to you and enthrall them, just like absolutely captivate them in a matter of seconds. And I was like, for me, it's really not comedy. Comedy's not my thing. I was like, but I got on YouTube and I learned like 5 card tricks. And so when I go to camp, when I go to places that I'm going to meet students that I don't know, having that element of just be like, hey, like, do you like cards? Or, hey, like, you want to hear a joke? Or, hey, whatever, like using those as opportunities to break down barriers and just start with laughter. I think that's missed so many times, is we try to have all of these serious conversations, and we don't, like, by the time we're done being serious, we've kind of lost the desire for joy, if that makes sense. And so, like, man, what are we doing? Like, God wants us to have joy and joy abundantly, and part of that is being able to laugh when we're talking about things that are going on, and just enjoy each other's company. And comedy brings a great insight into that. And then, so with that, though, kind of for the last little bit of our conversation, this is, of course, going to be going off of your years and years of expertise in student ministry.
6 months.
But yeah, hey, I was trying to give you some credit, okay?
Thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, I was a volunteer for forever, so you could ask me about volunteering.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So, but I guess to a more practical approach, because that's one of the things that we really like to try and do, especially when we have kind of topics that are brought to the table. How, like, what are some practical ways, I guess, that student pastors can encourage and implement laughter, or implement comedy, or implement those kind of barrier breaking moments in their ministries?
Yeah. So I think one of the main things, every time I play a pastor character, my friends and I will talk about it. Like, there is this, the key element is that pastors and youth pastors are just a little detached. Is that if they're talking to you, hey, how's school going? Oh man, that's awesome. Oh, how's your family? Oh yeah, oh, God's gonna do some great things. You can even see it. I mean, look at any church's promos. It's like, hey, what's up, guys? We're so excited about this Wednesday night. Blah 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 blah. So there's just this idea of like, there's no human element in it. There's no personality in it. All of it is, hey, what's up? We just want to welcome you guys to another Sunday. Even the announcements, all of those things are just canned. So I think there's one thing, like, if I'm at an event or something, just if I'm talking to somebody, just locking in with that person then and there in that moment to go, hey man, I'm not rushing anything else. I'm not trying to run to something else. I'm not trying to pray for you. I'm not trying to get you to pour your heart out. I'm not trying to, I'm just talking to you, and you're 13 and school's rough, and what are you most excited about this year? What do y'all normally do for holidays? You know, just those aspects of, hey, I'm talking to you in this moment and invested in you and who you are. That sincerity, I think, is really important. And from that, I think the comedy of you making a remark, it's not because, oh, they talked, I gotta say something. They finished talk, I gotta say something. No, it's, hey, I'm actually listening to you. Like I know who you are, and I know, you know, what you're looking forward to. I'd say, you know, this fall or something as the weather changes. And even then, even as you speak on stage too, I think there is a like an autopilot version of a lot of pastors where, you know, they're not really talking to people as much as they're talking at people. And I think a lot of, you know, comedians are kind of guilty of that too. Anybody who's on a stage a lot, you can become a victim of that, to where you just know, hey man, how's everybody feeling tonight? Woo! All right, man. Hey, let me tell you what, and you just kind of go into another thing. But I think with what comedies like kind of taught me is like, hey man, because it's a somebody responds, they respond, give, they respond. It's that aspect of communicating. It can't just be like, you want to connect with people, and the only way to connect with people is by being and sharing something real. And you can't share something real if you don't have it in and of yourself. So I love like personal examples in messages, and I still get invited to speak occasionally at places. And it is one of those things where I'm like, hey, I want to share the Bible. I want to share truth. But at the same time, I also want to share a part of me that the reason why this verse in particular stood out to me and where I'm at currently in life, or these verses or this passage, this story, this parable, the reason why it's relevant, period, the reason why it's relevant to us, but then also why it's relevant to me. Like why is the reason that it kind of stood out to me. And I think that's a thing that we should do, that we should stop outsourcing to, you know, funny sermon openers or like another reference of The Office, you know. That is going to fall short of digging deep and going, oh, this is an analogy, or this is something that I related to this in a sincere way that is probably, I really just got to keep on going, like divorced from, let's use a TV show or a movie or Disney or whatever. Like, hey man, what does this actually mean to me, you know, apart from anything that I kind of entertain. And once you kind of get there, I think when you start to communicate, people start listening, because, you know, they know that, you know, you're not just parroting things that you've seen or heard, you know, or I think a lot of student ministry, you listen to a lot of podcasts from other pastors. So you end up, this is a thing that a lot of comedians or people who travel get guilty of, is if you travel so much, your stories and your analogies and your jokes end up being about travel. So you can see that a lot of people are like, I was just in Denver, I was just in whatever, I got on a plane, I'm in the back of a cab, have you ever been in an Uber? And most of the people that you're talking to do not know what you're talking about. And so there is an element of like, man, you have to be grounded, you have to be involved in your own life, and like, you know, observing your day to day to speak in a place of realism. I think that is the main point, man. That's what I think we should all be hunting down if you're communicating to people.
I know you said you weren't going to be the serious guy, but holy cow, that was a bomb, dude. That was awesome.
Oh, man. All right. Well, if you want to donate to my ministry, y'all, go to miketodd.org now. I'd love your love offerings if you are impacted by that 6-minute spiel.
Dude, but at the same time, like, I mean, you kind of took it straight through, like, the question that I'd asked, and you're like, dude, it's not about laughter, it's not about what sermon you're preaching, it's about being authentic, it's about being original. Like showing them you, not showing them some carbon copied hyped up pastor that like is cool down the street. Like they want to know someone that's real, and like having that mindset, man, like there's so much power to it. And then also with that, like sharing you means like sharing your goods and sharing your struggles. I had a cool opportunity this last summer, where like I've been very open with my youth kids about most of the struggles that I've had in my walk as a Christian and everything, and talked about overcoming one of the addictions, that's like really prevalent among teenagers. And I actually had a high schooler get up at camp and give their testimony. And basically they said they had the strength to do it because I spoke up about dealing with it and struggling with it myself.
Yeah.
And so like having that authenticity, having that like just the ability to be raw and be real. I think that's what the world's looking for. I think we talk about that all the time, but I don't think we do it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, well, we need to be raw. We need to be authentic. We need to do all these things. And it's like, well, we're going to go back to this model because it looks better on Instagram
Well,
or
also,
whatever. And
it's
it's
just
like,
one of those things. It's just easier to talk about than actually be about it, man. Like,
yeah,
being as a lot of the events that I've been at, I always try to make it a point to be in the lobby, to be out and about and hanging out with people, um, meeting people. And my wife, or if I usually would travel with somebody. I think all the youth pastor summits I was with my buddy Tony, and it drives me. If I'm with somebody, it drives them insane because they're like, "Why? What were you doing talking to that person? Like, we needed to. All the restaurants have closed now. You know, it's past 10 p.m. Why were you talking so much?" I'm like, man, I just love people, man. I just love
yeah,
people, and I love talking to people, get to know people, and it's not. I think I enjoy it now more. When I was a student pastor, the goal was to try to like win somebody over and get the student like love bomb somebody. That's it's like a term that's very I've heard, and it's very prevalent in churches. We're kind of like trying to win, but no, that's not the goal, man. Especially with students, man. The goal. I used to take students out. I'm like, hey, let's go get ice cream. And they're like, well, what do you want to talk like? The pastor at the time would be like, oh, have a win, go out, minister to a kid, pray for a kid. And I remember thinking, I don't know, man. I think that's going to come up. I think that'll come up. I hope that comes up. But also,
yeah,
we're going to get very cheap burgers at Cookout. That's what's going to happen right now. And everything else, I'm not in control of it. Or like
yeah,
right now with my wife and our kids, we'll invite a friend over. And there is this idea of like, it should be meaningful, right? Like, should it be a small group? Should it be like, should I get a Bible? And I'm like, no, that's not the goal. The goal is I'm going to fire up the smoker. I'm going to throw some ribs on. We're going to eat, we're going to make some sides. We're going to eat with the family. The kids, they'll play outside. And always, 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 without fail, God leads our time together. And I know I sound like a pastor, man. Oh, crap. But God, God really does lead that time together into something meaningful. And it ends up
yeah,
being something like that needed to happen. And it's not because we went in thinking with like a checklist of like, right now we're gonna lock, as we pray, we're gonna pray about their future and pray. No, it's just, hey man, we just want to listen to you. We want to eat first and we want to
yeah,
talk. And from that,
yeah,
God is not gonna let this time be in vain, and he never does.
yeah. And I had this exact conversation with one of our pastors this week. We were talking about how like you just this overart and like this overwhelming need for community,
Yeah.
and how like a lot of families are not finding community in church anymore, and so they're going to youth sports, they're going to whatever, and a lot of the young families that are not in churches are it's because they don't feel like they have
Yeah.
a place here. And so with that kind of mindset, it was just like, like the gospel will forever be important, but like we still have to get them in the building.
Right.
And the way that we get them in the building is building that relationship, being real, building that community. And I said, I was like, the thing that I've always seen is like, even Jesus and the disciples, Jesus built community before they ever knew who he was.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, like, just the power and the impact behind, like, being authentic and trying to build those relationships first. Like you said, I'm sure it'll come up. Like, because by that time, the relationship, they're going to build it. Like, they're going to have that opportunity to where they start trusting you. And then when those situations come up out of the trust through the relationship you've built,
Yeah.
that's when those questions start happening and all the good conversations start pouring out, especially when they need help.
Right.
And man,
Right.
you can't discredit that at all.
No.
There is a lot of power in taking a youth student to go buy some really, really cheap burgers.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah, man.
I mean, it used to be Taco Bell, like that used to be my thing like 10 years ago. And now Taco Bell's more expensive than all the burger places. So
I
like,
wouldn't know. I never was on the Taco Bell train, man. Sadly, my wife is, and she's been trying to get me on board, and
yeah,
I'm like, no, it's too late for me. I'm 32.
yeah.
I can't start a
Dude,
chalupa addiction now.
when it was like 99-cent tacos or whatever, like that was the stuff back then. But
Oh
now,
yeah.
like, too expensive now.
Oh, it is.
But with that being said, dude, like, I love the conversation. I love that kind of unintentionally, like, this conversation kind of shifted gears, but I think that there's beauty in that for the sake of, like, this is something that really, really does need to be addressed. And I think part of this is presented through the humor that you've done in the past. And I'm sure that as you continue to do stuff,
Yeah.
there will be more and more doors opened and feet stepped on and all those things. But like, if you don't get your feet stepped on
Oh
every now
man.
and then,
That's
you
my
never
that's
move for change.
that's gonna be a statistic that I'm gonna add towards the end of the year here in 2024. Views, likes, events visited, feet stepped on.
There you go. There you go.
That's awesome.
But man, last thing for me, and then we'll kind of close it off, is just twofold. First off, if you have a word of encouragement for youth pastors that are listening to this, and then secondly, just man, shameless plug about you, what you have going on, all your social media,
Yeah.
anything else that you want to share, and
Okay.
then we'll kind of close it up.
There's a quote by a guy. I've shared it a lot. I try to share it on podcasts where I'm at, and I think it really probably summarizes our talk very well. It's by Harold Clurman, the dean of American theater. He once said, "Make them laugh, and while their mouths are open, pour in truth." That is, I heard that quote I think in 2014 or 15, and I think it's been in the foundation of so many things that I've written, and things that have done well, even the things that have bombed online, is that, hey man, I'm trying to make people laugh here, and somewhere while their mouths are open, they're gonna also catch some truth as well. So there is that. I think that's a
Shoot, dude,
yeah.
that's like,
Harold
I had to
Clurman,
write
man.
that one down.
Yeah, man, it's really really good. I think that's the beauty of comedy is, man, you can, you know, right hook, left jab somebody, and then all of a sudden, you hit them with something. They're like, "Whoa, what was that?" And you're like, that's just a joke, right?" And you're like, "No, there's truth in that," and they get to receive that too.
Yeah.
There's that, man. You know what it is. Shama for Reels on Instagram. Follow me. If you know, if you don't want to get your feet stepped on, don't follow me. That'd probably be better for you, but you probably will see me. I come up in people's algorithms, unless you block me. You're welcome to do that too. I'm probably going to be going on tour. Not probably. I will be going on tour this fall. Me, another comedian named Jaron Myers, and another comedian also
Oh,
named
Jaren.
Mike Goodwin. We're hitting the road this fall before Thanksgiving. So come
Nice.
out, see us. I think we'll be in Dallas, Fort Worth area, at a church there. I don't, actually, let me go. Since I actually do need to plug this, I feel like they haven't announced it yet formally on social media. So now you will be aware. It will be at the Compass Church right there in Fort Worth, Texas. That's November 22nd. That's the Friday before Thanksgiving, y'all. Come out. And we'll also be in Longview, Texas, Waco, Texas, Kansas City, Missouri, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Columbia, South Carolina, and Douglasville, Georgia. So if any of those cities are close to where you are, come out. Hang out with me. Hang out with
Yeah,
us. It'll be
that's
really
awesome.
fun. And then
No,
follow
and
me and all the things.
yeah. And if you haven't had a chance to see Shama in person or catch out his Instagram stuff, I will be the first to endorse. Dude's hilarious. He has a heart behind what he does. You can see his passion and you can see his creativity come out in pretty much any conversation he has, as you just kind of witnessed. And man, it's a blessing to get to sit down and have this conversation. to get to know Shama. I hope this is not the last time we run into each other. Man, I just thank you for the conversation. Thank you for just being, quite honestly, like we just talked about. Thank you for being real and authentic, and just this mindset of, man, sometimes people just need toes to be stepped on so real conversations can happen. Yeah. And that's one of the beauties of like incorporating comedy into the church and bringing that laughter and that joy into the room as well. So,
yes, sir.
But that's awesome. So if you are listening, that is all we have for this show. So if you are a frequent listener of our podcast, all we ask is that you do your part to get our podcast out to the greater student ministry audience. Share our podcast with your youth pastor friends on social media, or tag a specific episode that stood out to you. Either way, be sure to tag us in the post by using your favorite platform and using our tag @TalkStudentMen. And then finally, if you'd like to be on the show in the future, as we say all the time, like, we don't have a show without guests. Send us an email or reach out to us on social media. The email is podcast@studentministryconversations.org, and we'd love to set up a time you can come on the show with us. But Shama, this conversation, like I said, dude, it has been fantastic. Loved it. Some incredible truth bombs dropped in this. When I was thinking that like it was going to be a 45-minute just power hour of Shama just cracking jokes, but man, there's some tremendous truth, dude, and boldness to what you said.
You know, people get caught off guard because people. I just happened this weekend. I was in Nashville. People will meet me and they'll be like, "Tell me about yourself, man." I'll tell them, and they're like, "Oh, dude, you're actually like really nice." And I'm like, what did you think? Did you think I was just like all that spice of the videos that I make? They're like, you thought that's who I was as a person, just like a brooding, angry comic? I'm like,
I'm gonna try to not be insulted by what you just said.
Well, the thing is, I thought it was really funny because I don't share a lot of personal things on Instagram, so people don't know that I'm a very boring dad.
Yeah.
And a husband, you know. So I think that is just the part where, you know, conversations like this hopefully is where people kind of go, oh, actually that guy is actually not just like a rude comedian. He actually he has some stuff to say. I don't like it, but he has stuff to say.
Yeah. No, well, man, great conversation. I'm here speechless, just trying to think through all the things that we've been talking about for the last 50 minutes. But with that being said, if you are listening to this, we hope you have a great week. We hope you are inspired, and we'll see you guys next week.
See ya.